Very strange. Alright, now I need something to prop up this camera with. Well, I'll use this camera to prop up this camera. Yeah, that'll work maybe. So they don't touch anything. Yeah, it almost works.
Yeah, the Koch brothers, I mean, they're probably going to hunt me down and have me killed for saying this, but, I mean, those guys should be put in a fucking those guys should be put in Guantanamo. I mean, those are the most, you talk about, FBI 10 most wanted list, the Koch brothers should be the top two.
Oh, whatever. Yeah, like they're any worse than they're any worse than the Google cunts or the fucking wait, how are they any more evil than Bill Gates? What the fuck has that cunt done?
Way fucking worse.
Yeah, says you. You don't know what Bill Gates has been doing for the last 10 years. Who knows what he's been fucking doing in terms of weasel. Look what he did to the whole Netscape thing and how he got the government to get him out of that mess.
Bill Gates has been sabotaging climate change. The Koch brothers have. And in fact, all these stupid videos on YouTube, chemtrails and all that bullshit, I wouldn't be surprised if half of it was sponsored by the Koch brothers. I mean, these guys use every trick in the book.
Yeah, well, whatever. The bottom line is if those tricks work, then the opposition is pretty lame.
No, the opposition, everybody knows what these guys are. The opposition's not lame. The opposition is on ass.
No, I think it's just evidence. I'm just saying, this whole argument that propaganda wins, I think is just kind of bullshit.
Sell soda.
Well, okay. All right, I mean, maybe, okay, I could agree with you on that. But, I mean, these guys are pumping $900 million into the next presidential campaign. These motherfuckers are trying to direct the course of the next election through money alone.
Oh yeah, I know, but the idea that money alone would get somebody elected is pretty lame, isn't it? Isn't that a commentary on the system and that people keep buying into this fucking system?
Well, this has gone just a little bit beyond commentary. This is like real staggering, earth-shaking realization.
Yeah, well, whatever. I don't think your politicians are worth much if they're buyable. So again, it just doesn't.
Well, whatever. I don't think
the commentary is on the system itself. If it's vulnerable to propagandists, then you don't have much of a system.
We've always known that our politicians are viable. We've always known that. That's not news. We've known that since what? Tammany Hall.
Well, exactly. I'm just saying, if we know it and we don't fix it, what do you call that?
I think that the problem for me is that the Kochs represent, or they're the best example of a problem in politics, which is that it is possible in America to spend so much money or have so much money in politics behind a particular point that it no longer becomes my one vote against yours. You, in a sense, weaken my God-given same, constitutional right as an American to have a say in politics. And the Kochs probably would just be the worst offenders, but overall there's a problem, Like, it's not, money is speech, right, and speech is free, but once it actually also, makes my speech and my vote count for less, that's not constitutional.
Yeah, I know, but it's not doing that in any literal way. It's only doing that because people they want this kind of a system. They voted for this kind of a system. They don't want to fix it because they're all feeding at the trough. Everybody's got part of a special interest. They don't want an honest system because an honest system isn't going to give them a lifetime pension for just showing up for work like the teachers. They don't want to play a fair game because they're taking advantage of the unfair game. They don't want it. They want their mortgage deduction. They want all their fucking perks.
It's not just that, Gary. I don't have, and a whole bunch of Americans put together don't even have anywhere near $900 million to put behind things we care about as Americans, and we get
I
drowned
know,
out.
but they drown out by what? 20-second commercials. I mean, if people fall for that shit, I'm just saying most people don't fall for that shit, right? So we're talking about the dumbest assholes in America who can't figure out who to vote for, right? They go up to the last day of the election, they don't know who to vote for. Well, they shouldn't be allowed to vote at all then.
But it's not just like commercials. But I understand there is that part of it too, and I agree with you. Like most Americans are stupid. I mean, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying you can't if you're going to have a system, then you're going to say let capitalists run it. Well, then it's going to be a shitty system. So they got to say they don't want a capitalist system. They got to quit paying for a capitalist system.
I mean, my answer to this, as I've said in the past, is, well, just more transparency. You know, capitalist, but a democracy, because at least we know where all the money's coming from, and, you know, we kind of know who it's coming from.
Yeah, I just say you just run for politics. I'm just saying you just have formatted debates. Give people the opportunity to publish all they want on the internet and on cable TV, and each candidate gets his little spiel, gets to write up his papers, and if people pay attention, they pay attention. If they don't, they don't. But this idea that commercials are going to make the difference to people with a brain is just bullshit. I've never been convinced by a commercial. I certainly wouldn't change my party affiliation based on a commercial.
Yeah, well, don't say so narrowly. It's not just on you know, television time. Although
well, I know. I'm just saying they're only spending all this money on the 10% of the voters, all right, who don't know what they think. So that's who they're spending all the money on. Okay, the diehard Republicans aren't going to change their vote. The diehard liberals aren't changing their vote. So they're only fighting over these wishy-washy people. And those wishy-washy people are just, like I said, what's the difference? They're not going to vote the right way anyway. They're just going to vote based on whether the guy has a beard or something. You know, or if he's wearing a funny little hat on his head, they'll say, oh, what's that little funny creepy hat he's wearing? I ain't voting for him. He's wearing a funny hat.
It's a lot of money in politics. Probably shouldn't be as much, or at least there should be more like transparency. I'll at least say that, you know.
Yeah, I'm just saying that I don't want to vote for somebody who's spending the money on commercials. I just want to vote for an honest person to represent me. I mean, the president shouldn't have shit power anyway. The Congress has all the power, and that's where we should have our representation. Thank you for talking over me.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry, Gary. I didn't mean to.
Okay, I was just being raggy about it.
Yeah, I was just saying we've been working on
I was just being raggy
about it. But yeah, we've been working on campaign finance reform for years and decades. You know, nothing's ever come out.
Well, you can't do it. It's a stupid idea. It's a stupid idea. I'm not going to publicly pay fucking networks money to put 20-second commercials on TV. That's just fucking ludicrous. I don't want to pay networks to broadcast bullshit and lies and propaganda. So the whole idea of publicly financing is idiotic. And the whole idea that you can somehow control speech or how people spend money is idiotic because, yeah, I'll just do theme commercials then. I'll just do commercials about the darkies coming to get us or some other kind of commercial to indicate my point of view without naming the politician. So you're not going to shut people up. It's America, for fuck's sake. And we've declared money some kind of private right. So, yeah, people are going to have a lot of it and they're going to be able to spend it. So that's what we voted for, a capitalist system. So you got to live with that liability. But my argument still remains the same. If you've got a decent argument, you should be able to win the fucking argument. But the point is that they're not winners. Obama had a great argument, right? I mean, he ran on a bunch of shit that he didn't intend to do. He talked all about change and progress and moving into the future, and he just basically closed the door as soon as he got elected and said, yeah, I'm just going to be doing this so there's a painting on the wall and I was president. But I don't give a shit about any of this crap. I don't have a clue how to run this country. I'll just, mush my way through it.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of stuff not replied. I mean, Willie Horton as the darkies are going to come to get us, and
Well,
Obama
I'm just
as
saying you're not going to be able to regulate that kind
his
of
skill set
political
in court
commentary. People are going to be
propaganda.
allowed to pay money to have propaganda made. You're not going to be able to outlaw propaganda.
No, you can't. I mean, I guess Tocqueville, sort of, anticipated that in democracy, you're not going to be able to outlaw propaganda. Anticipated that in a democracy, things were going to get ugly and things were going to get messy. And I guess the ultimate manifestation of the dark side of not being able to control propaganda. I'm sorry to drop the Nazi card, but would be Kristallnacht and Hitler's, what he did in the early 1930s, burning down the synagogues and, blaming it on the Jews. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, the ultimate reverse propaganda in the Bernaysian sense, manipulating the masses of people.
Yeah, well, so what? Yeah, that's been a fact of history for a long time now. So I'm just saying the average person shouldn't be too vulnerable to those kind of deceptions anymore because they've been there and done that. We've seen the lies, the Obama lies of I'm not spying on you, except I'm spying on you. I mean, we've already been there and done this shit. We've done the fake wars caused by the fake, you know, incursions. We create the problem and then provide the solution. Libya.
Yeah, it's another. There's a phraseism that I think is bandied about too much by conspiracy theorists, which is this so-called false flag. And somebody coined this about 10, 12 years ago, and at the time it was very unique, and it had a very electrifying effect on the internet population. But now I think it's just gone stale. So, and everybody, whenever anything pops up that doesn't make sense, they say false flag, and so now it's just basically
Yeah, I know, but conspiracies have been around
where
forever.
at one
A
time
certain percentage of the
they used to have a lot.
population is gullible and stupid. This is another one of these things we've known for a long time. All right,
what were they talking about there? Like,
my whole life people have been whining about Kennedy assassination and all their little conspiracy theories about the Kennedy assassination. So it's been going on for 50 fucking years. All right, it really isn't a subject in my opinion. People are stupid. Yes, okay, shoot them.
Folks, oh yeah!
You are Toby.
Fat the head, woo!
Yeah, well, have fun while you have the chance, because you're probably only going to be alive another week or two.
But in the beginning of all that 9/11 conspiracy shit, I mean, I will do a mea culpa. I bought into a lot of it, but gradually I came to understand that it was just paranoia, building on paranoia, building on misconstrued facts, building on unconnected facts. And I finally said, you know what, fuck this. I'm done with this shit.
Yeah, well, real conspiracies can't take place. You can't have a real conspiracy. If you got more than 5 people involved in your conspiracy, then it isn't going to happen. Okay, it's going to be outed. So there's just no point in talking about conspiracy theories.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I gotta say one thing. One thing that sticks in my mind. I mean, World Trade Center Towers 1 and 2 doesn't stick in my
Don't
mind.
do this.
What sticks in my mind is Building 7.
Yeah, well, don't bother with this crap. I mean,
Okay, that's
well, I
fine.
mean, you're supposed to
I
have
mean, you're
again, you're supposed to have a physics degree, and you're not smart enough to look at the video and realize how the building fell down, right? Just look at the video, and you can see how the building fell down. The entire inside of the building fell down first. It was just the shell of the building remaining. You can see each floor falling down. The air blows out the windows as each floor pancakes. The outside walls were still intact, and it wasn't until 4 or 5 seconds after the building had already started to collapse that the top of the building started caving in. So the building had already collapsed 5 seconds before people think it did, because it still looked like a building. But it was already halfway through its collapse before the facade started to collapse. And it's clearly visible. You can watch the video of it. You can watch the video. You can watch the video and watch the blinds in the room. You can watch the blinds flying out the window. There was so much air pressure.
Gary, I read that. I read the Popular Mechanics.
Go watch it! Watch it! It's a video! It's on tape! You can actually watch it!
I watched 100 times.
Well, you're right. You don't have a watch. You don't have a watch. You don't have a watch, and you can't watch a videotape with sound. With that includes sound. The sound of no explosions. Okay, so it has sound. You can watch it falling on the video with your watch, and you can understand that. Oh, that's what happened.
Gary, I'm just talking to you like a construction manager. That's all. I built these things.
What does that have to do? What does that have to do? What does that have to do? What does that have to do with the fact that the inside of the building fell down before the interior of the building, meaning that it took much longer for the building to fall down than people think, because the facade crumbled much quicker than the floors could crumble?
Anthony?
No, but you're just going to say something stupid. I'm just saying it's truth or bullshit. There's no mystery about Building 7. A big pile of the fucking Twin Towers fell on it. It was on fire for 5 hours. The fact that it fell down is not fucking incredible. The entire foundation underneath that it was sitting on had been shocked by 2 giant buildings collapsing right next door to it. It was like rumbled like sand. You know, like, I mean, if you jiggle dirt, it gets all loose. The whole fucking structure of the building its whole integrity was ruined.
Yes, I get what you're saying, Gary. I hear what you're saying, and it's all perfectly logical.
But I choose to reject it. Yes, okay, fine. Fine, just leave the room when you say it's all perfectly logical. You're already done. You can't say but. You can't say but after it's all perfectly logical. You can't do that. That's against the law, all right? You cannot say but after saying it's all perfectly logical.
Gary, I don't give a shit about dogma. I don't give a shit about propaganda. I don't give a shit. I'm a logician. I only care about logic. What works, what doesn't work. That's all I care about.
Well, I don't know what that means. I don't care. I don't know what that means because you're not paying attention. Well, I'm sorry. It's not logical to have a sentence where you say that's all perfectly logical and then say but. I'm just saying that's not logical. In and of itself, right there, you're already in logical trouble because your but isn't going to make any sense. Perfect logic can't be butted.
Gary, perfect logic can't be butted. If I could complete a sentence. All I was saying is I know what goes into these POCs. I know about the rebar. I know about the concrete, the PSI. I know about the structural integrity of these buildings. I know what they're designed to withstand. All I'm saying is that was odd. I'm not agreeing with the conspiracy theorists.
Well, I'm just saying, I don't see how you could possibly draw the conclusion that
It
there's
doesn't
anything odd
quite
about a
fit.
building that had a hunk
That's
of the
it.
Twin Towers fall on it, that was on fire for 5 hours, and that had its foundation. It was only 100 and some yards or feet away from the Twin Towers. Had its entire foundation shockwaved.
And that could be the explanation.
Well,
They had a
I
huge
think it's
fuel
kind of
tank
an
in the
entire
basement of the building 7.
explanation, but whatever.
Stupid. Which was a stupid fucking design. Which was a stupid fucking design decision. And maybe that is what caused it.
Oh well, whatever. I just think
And
it's
I'm
stupid to talk about the
not
design.
disagreeing with
I don't
that.
think it's a design
I'm just
issue.
saying
Big
I
giant
don't
plane
think the
full of
9/11
fuel
was
flies into air
sufficiently
building fall
investigated.
down. Not unexpected.
And no, jackass, I am not a 9/11 truther. God damn.
He's an ex-truther. Yeah. But it's a little X. It's not a capital X. It's just a little X.
All right, can we move on to like the something like the Miss Universe pageant or something? Or
So, Sub DNA, I don't know if you were serious when you were talking about being a logician, but did you catch over the recent weeks Logic rolls the dice and his questioning of Hume's, idea that essentially the what is it called, that we can't arrive in a kind of objective morality, the is-ought problem. So, are you familiar with that debate that took place recently?
no, I'm sorry, I'm not.
That's okay. So I was wondering if you think, so Gary has suggested in the past that potentially we could arrive at a defense of the idea that sentient suffering is bad by pure logic. Do you think we can do that?
Yes, I do believe you can make an argument based on purely on logic. I don't think. Well, I suspect it may not be convincing to many people, but I do think that you can make an airtight argument based purely on logic. So yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So I've been looking for something like that, and I just haven't found it. I mean, what I see are people who are very open about the idea that they are only critics of antinatalism and that they themselves aren't supposing any kind of moral framework. So people like Hathaway or like Anakanavad will critique Gary's philosophy, but they don't prescribe anything on their own. They don't have an answer on their own. They don't provide any answers about how one should make choices in life and what one should assume is right or wrong. All they do is criticize. And I suppose that we could find. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I interrupted you. Please complete.
Well, I think you got the gist of my idea.
Yeah, the problem with moral frameworks is life. I mean, you've got substrates, levels, right? Fairly high level abstraction is probably pretty high up. And there's probably many layers below morality and biology. And we're trying to build an argument. And the problem is, what infuriates me, or sorry, I kind of gave myself away here. What frustrates me is that people don't take the argument seriously. And by that I mean when you take the argument seriously, you realize it's going to take a long, long time to go from biology to moral, and it's not, and you cannot bridge that gap. You cannot bridge that gap between biology and ethics and morality with dogmatism or dogmatic arguments or screeds or polemics or jumping up and down like a 3-year-old. This takes real serious concentration. It takes real serious thought by serious philosophers. And I think one of the problems, this concentration of philosophic focus, really superficial moral matters that really don't mean a god issues about race and gender, which really just don't count for all that much. But if you're at like Mills College in Oakland, they tell you these are the issues that count for everything, right? Race and gender and cross-gender, and these are the issues. This is it. This is, and you cannot touch upon these things, because if you touch upon these things, well, I'm sorry, you're just not graduate school material. I'm sorry. We really don't need you. We really don't need you at NYSU. We really don't need you at Stanford. We really don't need you at the Haas Business School. We really don't need you anywhere. You're just, you're not graduate school timber.
Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from.
So we've got a culture.
Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from.
We've got a culture that's pre-programmed to go in a certain direction.
Well, so in terms of logic and formal logic,
I mean,
have you encountered anything that entails evaluation of sentient suffering that is outside of metaphysics. I mean, so obviously it's just formal logic. It has nothing to do with metaphysics itself.
No.
But you're supposing we could get there, and then it may exist.
Yeah, I do. I think that I'm a very humorless individual, and I look for a time in history or another group of humorless individuals who are like me. And what I can find is the Hellenic Greeks, the Hellenistic and the Hellenic Greeks, who were very humorless. Everything that they did had to arrive at a conclusion. I mean, even their plays. I think if we took that kind of stratagem towards life, yes, we could find an answer. I mean, the thing is, I don't want to get all postmodernist on you, but I mean, and tell you why we can't do it because of our cultural roots. But the fact is, we live in a very juvenile country. The reason we can't do what the reason we can't do a trappers amidst these logical syllogistic points is because we're an incredibly infantile society. Incredibly stupid. Juvenile. I mean, we read comic books. We watch movies about comic book heroes. We play video games. And that's basically what occupies our time. I mean, America is among the stupidest and most juvenile countries on Earth. In fact, it's got to be at the very
well,
bottom.
the Greeks invented drama. The Greeks invented drama.
Even Sierra Leone would be above us.
I'm sorry, Sub. I didn't mean to interrupt you. There's a little bit of lag.
That's okay. I was just going to say, I would think even the countries of West Africa, like Sierra Leone, Cote d'Ivoire, I would say would be above us in terms of intellectual and emotional maturity.
Hey, Papi, where's my where's my gift? Papi, where's my gift for Noel? For Christmas?
So, I mean, did you have a follow-up question on that?
Well, I don't know if Gary seems to be frozen. I don't know if he's coming back. I just blocked that one new user who joined. No, I don't really have a follow-up question. I was going to suggest that, entertainment as a distraction, but also as an element of religion and myth and culture has been around for a long time. And, of course, the Greeks connoted tragedy to comedy and viewed them as kind of a flip side psychologically of the same thing. So from tragedy comes comedy. And that's part of that kind of psychological element of, what do you call it, where you're cognitive dissonance, essentially. How to continue, how to live, how to formulate a life in the face of such tragedy and chaos. And I think we're still utilizing those forms, of entertainment and of tragedy and comedy but I don't know how successful it is in terms of actually fulfilling whatever mythological impulses those things had for people in the past. So I think that, mythology is dead, essentially. And so it is just pure entertainment and distraction, unfortunately, and it's less about a kind of catharsis through art.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, first of all, I don't know that the Greeks said that through tragedy comes comedy. I think what they said was that through tragedy comes catharsis, right? And that's different from comedy. Through tragedy comes this relief, this understanding of what life is. So I think when you look at Grecian tragedy, I think that's what. And I'm trying to remember what your second point was. It's a good point, which I don't want to forget. And I lost it.
That's all right, man. So getting back to my original point, my question was, in regards to the is-ought problem, potentially does logic, academic pure logic, provide some means for humanity to wrestle with that problem in an objective, what we could consider an objective way? And I suspect that it's possible. I suspect that if an objective morality at all can be said to exist, it must be that the unnecessary or undue suffering of a sentient being is bad. And we can ascertain why it is bad or a negative. We can ascertain that it is a negative state, and we can ascertain what that means in a hedonic experience for any sentient being, scientifically, empirically. And thus we can assume that it is bad. And that doesn't require morality, and it doesn't require empathy. The question then would be, well, what the ought? How do you derive the ought from such an is? The question. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I thought you were done, so keep going.
Well, I think you get the point. So I'm not sure if the is-ought problem could ever actually be solved. Because in the end, you have to take a description that is, empirical and scientific, logically calculated. And in the end, you're going to have to make a prescription about an action. And any time a human acts, it's going to be subjective and have potential bias, no matter how reasonable and calculative we assume that it is.
I just think that's absolute rubbish. I don't know why you.
I know, Gary. I know. I understand that, but this is the thing: is it is a kind of a semantic argument that it comes down to, and you have people like Hathaway and people like Anaconabad who will always criticize, but they will never suppose that they have an answer to life's problem.
Well, I'm just saying, it's just a duplicity because, number one, you don't set standards like that for anything else you make declarative statements about. But, so I could just call hypocrisy on this idea that you can't make a declarative statement about I'm on Earth and I'm breathing oxygen and water is wet, and you can't say anything about anything. So you're just basically saying that nothing is nothing. And that is just absolute. I mean, I'm just saying that this has this idea that there's no definition of an is that's good or bad. It's just stupid. There's lots of ises that have in the sentence good and bad. I mean, it's just stupid to say there's no such thing, because I can say bad. I can just change it to badder. I can just change it to gooder.
Yes, I understand, and I'm looking for a formal, logical proof that might have been given at any time in history to support that. I understand, and I'm looking for.
Well, I just don't know what you mean by a logical proof in the sense that there's no logical way to escape the fact that you label things in the world. And if you're going to say that labeling is intrinsically subjective, I'm going to say that's intrinsically nonsense. Labels aren't subjective. Labels, and especially they're not. There's no evidence that all labels are incorrect or that the preponderance of labels are incorrect. Unless you're willing to say that most labels are incorrect, I don't understand how this fucking. What proof do I have to establish for the fact that we can establish recognitions of conditions, and I can just merely state that something has properties and it belongs in a category. The properties of bad are known, and we can put things in the bad category.
Exactly. And that's when I started using the psychological term valence, because it's not, supposedly it's not.
But I don't know why, it's just that you people are just trying so hard to avoid reality. They're just finding any ways to evade taking responsibility for a truth. Just blow the truth up.
Well, I'm not purposely trying to do that. I'm actually trying to bridge the is-ought gap with a logical argument.
Well, I just don't know I don't know what form you're expecting the logical argument to take. I mean, there's no statement you can make that's logical without the premise of you accepting the existence of logical statements. So it's just illogical to even talk about logic if you're going to say words don't mean anything.
Well, they do mean things, but the problem is that they're interpreted in subjective ways, right? So that's the language problem. So if we were going to program a computer to respect sentient suffering, how would we go about that?
Well, I'm just saying, if there are explicit ways you can say things where they're not subject to opinion. I mean, you can say things so explicitly and so clearly that they're, like I said, I could say water is wet, and it would be undeniable statement, because the word wet was invented to describe the character of water. So there's no making a mistake there. There's no possibility of a mistake. And I'm just saying that there's statements you can make that are so explicit that there's the evidence that this is a reliable function to label and categorize.
Right.
But I don't know how you can have language if you're going to say I don't believe in labels and categories, or if I think they're subject to some sort of intrinsic fallibility.
Well, that's the problem with philosophy, right? So, I mean, that is what we've arrived at, is exactly that, and that's why I say that it's like a dead end.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying that I don't see how it's a dead end, because I'm saying that the victory goes to the person who rationally recognizes that words do mean something. They do describe an actual condition, and you can measure whether somebody fits the conditions.
Yeah, but a person coming from a post-structural semiotic argument would say, oh, that's, hogwash, and those are all concepts, and they're all human, and therefore they're fallible.
Well, I'm just saying, though, I'm just saying that they can't speak a language saying that, because then they'd have to admit that their language has no coherency. If the language has coherency, then it must be a useful process. It must be reflective of some reality, or you wouldn't be speaking the language. If the language was full of wrong, you wouldn't be using it. You'd be intrinsically misrepresenting and confusing people by your own argument if you were conceding that the words didn't have meaning.
Right. Well, that is ultimately, don't you think, what a lot of contemporary philosophers are suggesting? I mean, this is the paradox, right?
I don't know if they're suggesting it. I don't think they're taking responsibility for it, just as the anarchists aren't taking responsibility for the 9 million problems their anarchy creates. So I'm just saying, if you're not going to take responsibility for the fact that you are using a language, you do accept categories, you're just taking this one thing and saying, this one thing I will not allow to be categorized.
Right.
I mean, clearly it's this idea of just if you'd almost have to concede that you were doing some dishonest labeling if you're going to say that labels aren't useful. So, I'm just saying that there's nothing intrinsically different about discovering value than there is discovering something materially real, except that it doesn't have a material reality. But you can deduce its existence. I mean, if ghosts really existed, even if we couldn't see them, we might be able to prove their existence by some other method than a material method.
Right.
By,
well, that's why I'm just concerned right now with trying to find what we could consider an empirical, scientific, and formally logical argument that would attest to the value of sentient suffering.
Well, I mean, that value has to concede that you have respect for the word. So I suppose if the value in sentient suffering is going to be made apparent through the only evidence you're going to have of it is the idea of personal experience. So you can't make an argument to the computer. You know what I'm saying? To something that doesn't feel, you're not going to be able to explain feelings. Because it has no reference.
Exactly that's exactly what I'm questioning. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, but that's a liability that we don't unfortunately have. We do experience sentience, so we do understand its character. But you really have to taste it to know it. You can't even describe flavors of food sometimes because there's nothing to compare it to. So you end up saying, well, it's like a strawberry, except it's more like a lemon, but it's a little bit like an orange, and it's a little bit,
And only depend on.
So there's nothing to compare sentience to. There's no little feelings that you can explain. You can compare it to like little sentience or half sentience or 10% sent. You know what I'm saying? There's just nothing to compare it to. So to something that never felt anything, never felt a feeling, there's no way you're going to be able to explain the feeling of good and bad because it just isn't going to know what that means.
Well, that's why I was choosing to use the word valence and valence states, where it doesn't necessarily have a moral meaning, but we can look at it just as the hedonic mechanism in which something is either attracted or repelled by a certain experience.
The point is that even if a non-sentient was put in the position of having to make a judgment about sentience, the fact is he could discern the reality of it just by the evidence. So even though he never tasted it and he can't personally understand it, he could certainly personally hear the testimony of the things that are sentient. He could personally understand that he doesn't have a brain capable of it. He could understand lots of elements that would give him reason to be able to acknowledge its existence. So he doesn't, because he can't feel it, doesn't mean he says it doesn't exist. The intelligence the intelligence would still be obligated to acknowledge the fact that there is this quality that exists, and once he says the word quality, he's already making a value judgment, right? I mean, something can't be qualitative and not have value connected to it.
Yeah. Excuse me for a second. I'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, so I think my rendering of the video didn't work. It's not properly, the buttons aren't doing anything on the computer, so it looks like it's crashed or failed in some way, which is irritating, but not the end of the world because it's all the same shit anyway, just a different week. But I guess we'll lost all of Subdenie's great advice about how I should, get a better website and save the world.
Well, your website does suck, and
I know, but that is kind of a subjective opinion for which I don't really necessarily take too seriously, but fine, whatever.
No, it's not. It is not subjective.
Yeah,
That
it
no,
is.
it is
Yes, it is. It
objective.
is quite obviously subjective.
Subjective with a capital.
Obviously
Oh.
subjective. I like websites where you click the button and the shit you clicked on you go to. That's the kind of websites I personally like. I like websites that actually work.
Well, you're a curmudgeonly engineering type guy. And you have built which
You
reflects
are fucking pappy old
the world.
Yeah, you're really interesting, little backward
You are
hat
rich fat.
boy. Little backward hat boy. Yes, you're so easy with your little backward hat. Yes, you are. Little backward hat.
Oh, don't get rid of backwards hat, boy. No. Too late. He's gone. Anyway, yeah, I mean, logic. The only weapon we have against this irrational universe is logic. That's it. I mean, if you can name another human weapon that we have, but the only one I know of is logic. So that's the one that I employ.
Well, I mean, it's the only thing that is all the intelligence is built out of it. So you gain some facts, you identify categories and properties, and then you logically put things in categories, and you assign them properties, which are the same thing as assigning them membership in a category. So it's all categories and properties. That's how simple it all is. Labeling and honest labels.
Yeah,
That's all you're
exactly.
looking for is honest. Honest labels is all there is.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'm not the most fun guy at a party on Saturday night. I'm probably the guy standing at the fence, in the corner of the fence with a beer in his hand while the band is playing and nobody's talking to him. But I am pretty goddamn logical, and I mean, if you want to challenge me on the logic, you're in hazardous territory because I am.
Yo, sub DNA. You just can't do
miss
that in
logic.
this room. You can't do that in this room. You just can't do that because you have failed logically so many times in this room. I mean, just failed colossally. I mean, just put your foot in your mouth, digested it, shat it, and then tried to put it back on your foot. I mean, you just.
Oh, okay. Yeah, exactly. I will see the point. Well, I mean, by your view, I've
You're trying. Say you're trying
been
or
a
something.
logical
Say you're
judge.
trying. Say you're trying, and I'll let you get away with that.
I'm doing more than trying.
Well, yeah. Well,
I am
not on Saturday
succeeding.
nights. Not on Saturday nights. You're doing less than trying. You are trying.
Okay, I mean, okay, I am trying, but I mean, in times past, in let's have remembrance of times past. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I did explore some strange territory in times past with UFOs and
You're just, you really are hilarious. Times fast, like what, 15 minutes ago? Yeah, time. Oh, in the long ago history, 15 minutes ago when you, yes.
15 minutes ago? What are you talking about? 15
Yeah, 10 minutes ago. I mean, I had you conceding a point 10 minutes ago.
No. There's nothing I did to lie to me.
Yes, there was plenty you did, and there was plenty I corrected.
What are you talking about?
And then you conceded, and then you did the same thing. But whatever. It's a funny joke. One of your funnier jokes.
Look. I was a follower of Terrence McKenna for many years.
Yes, so that just points out that you were even less logical. That you were even in your long history, you were even less logical than you are now.
Well, At least I admit it.
Well, I know, but you didn't admit that you were not as good as you should be now, which is the important fact. You're not quite the erudite logician you
Man,
sell yourself to be.
you're you're like a verbal Sudoku puzzle, trying to figure out all your ins and outs.
Yeah, whatever. They're pretty straightforward, I think. Me right, you wrong. Aha.
Oh yeah. Try doing a level 6. I'd love to see that. I can do a level 3 and
Yeah,
sometimes a
without
level
even
4.
taking your shirt off, huh?
I can have never done a level 5. And I'd love to see you do a level. Shirt's on. Best I can tell.
Yeah, well, whatever. I'm just saying, whatever. Whatever.
Anyway, what I was saying is that logic is basically the only weapon that we have.
Yes, that's
against
exactly
nature.
what you said.
Nature is
That's
chaotic.
exactly what you
As
said.
You yourself. Oh, I'm reiterating the point. I'm just saying.
I know, that's
nature
exactly
is
what you're doing.
basically-
You're reiterating. I don't like reiterations.
John, now you have me.
So sub-DNA, do you think that
Logic
logic
is-
precludes metaphysics?
You'll have to ask it again. He was all feedbacky.
Sorry. Sub-DNA, do you think that logic precludes physics?
Yeah, I didn't hear that.
You'll have to say it again because now he was talking over you.
Does logic preclude?
Start now. Does logic preclude? I guess Hazy dropped off. That's funny. It's always something with this technology.
Well, that's too bad because that sounded like an interesting question. Does logic preclude?
You from realizing you're a bit of a fucktard.
Logic preclude.
Well, you could add anything. Does logic preclude you from believing that Moses was actually Tinkerbell?
Does logic preclude a Tinkerbell?
No.
No.
Moses was Tinkerbell. I would argue that Moses was a bit of a fairy. I mean, he did wear sandals. Okay, he was totally pussy whipped by God. So that I'm suspecting that Moses was really a tranny, and that what happened is that when he finally went to heaven, he said, "Oh, let me go back as Tinkerbell because I really want to do the chick thing," and so God let him come back as Tinkerbell.
Which talks about, bringing the Jews that you think, don't you think? I mean, I think that's some weird sick shit.
Yeah, well, none of that got recorded properly.
Weird, bizarre, sick shit. I mean, that's weird.
Life is weird, bizarre, sick shit.
So he goes and he hauls his son up a fucking mountain, and the son says, "But father, where is the sacrificial lamb?"
Yes.
And Abraham says, "Don't worry, God will provide the sacrificial lamb." And he gets up there, and he's ready to like cut his own son's throat, and the angel says, "Oh, oh, sorry, just kidding. God was just testing you, just
Yeah.
testing you to see if you were really gonna do it or not. And now that you proved yourself and you're really gonna do it, you're cool. You're in. You're in with the God crowd, and you're one of us. And welcome to the club, Abraham.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty good
Yeah,
test.
nice club to be in, huh?
Yeah, it's a pretty good test. Yeah. Well, don't you think they all have tests? Don't you think to be like a real good Islama loony that they have all kinds of tests, like where they have to cut their mother's nuts off or something?
I think that whole goddamn book of craziness.
Well, I know, but it is very popular among the people, apparently. Very popular among the people.
It spawned Islam. I think Islam came out of that. That is the Semitic tradition.
Well, they're
And I
both
think
based on the
Christianity
yeah, they're
evolved
both
out of
based on the looniness of the sorry to say the
Christianity came out of that.
the Judaism, which is not too smart a religion. I mean, nice cleanliness habits. It's good that they wash some things and
Yeah. And all that.
But just imagine if these Islamic loonies were drinking people, we'd really be in trouble.
I think no, I think just the opposite. I think if they were drinking people, we'd probably be a hell of a lot better off. Dump, I think it's a Bill Hicks joke or something. Dump pornography and bottles of Jack Daniels on them, and they're probably mellow the fuck out.
Well, I guess they might not be any holier than thou anymore. That's for sure, maybe. But they're already doing the fuck the kid thing and everything else. So I don't think being drunk is going to make them any more debaucherous. So yeah, I don't really buy the argument that they'll end up doing something drunk they wouldn't do straight. I mean, the shit they'll do straight is pretty fucking wacky. Let's go whack somebody's hands off, at the stadium. Let's go watch somebody get their hands whacked off. I mean, that's pretty wacky shit.
Yeah. Cut it off.
Yeah, so I mean, if they're doing that straight, then I don't think drunk they could be much worse. Well, almost out of time on this camera, so maybe I'll just give up. So, I'm tired, depressed and despondent, and sick of it all. And so I will leave the room to your competent control. Oh, we can hear the hazy question first. I forgot. How did it start again?
I'm sorry, my Flash crashed in the browser. I had to reload my browser and everything.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah.
I was asking whether logic precludes metaphysics. So, like Wittgenstein suggested, there's a famous quote that, logic can only probe so much, and after that, it must pass over all these other questions in silence.
Well, what's metaphysics anyway? I don't even understand this
Well, I mean,
conceptually.
almost by definition, logic precludes metaphysics because meta is meta, right? So meta is what comes before it. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be tautological or, you know, fatuous about this,
I understand.
but yes, logic.
Right. So these arguments depend on an ontological ground.
Metaphysics,
There's no central
almost by
ground.
definition.
There's no central ground, ontological ground for anybody to hold if they're going to, you know, assert themselves from one realm of philosophy or another.
Well, I think you have to obviously do that with a premise, and the premise is in the very fact that you're communicating. So I'm just saying, the minute you start using words, you've already established the reliability of these labels and concepts. So I'm just saying that it's just silly to say, let's have a conversation about how unreliable it is for us to communicate.
But that that's exactly what the semioticians do, right? And they're dancing
Well, I don't
with
see
the
how
linguistic.
they can possibly. How can they possibly do that? Because they couldn't have a profession. They couldn't even be labeled as semioticians if they're going to say none of the words have any meaning, because they're using them.
Well, what they're suggesting is that they're always going to be subjective and limited and biased.
Well, I'm just saying though, the subjective. You can't use the argument subjective when they're so reliable that you're willing to just utter them in a crowded room and expect everybody to understand what you're saying. So how can that possibly be called subjective? How can it be subjective when it's universal? When it's universally useful, you can't really call it subjective.
Well, that's why I'm trying to counter that kind of argument with an empirical and logical argument that is, you know, unviable or violable.
Well, I'm just saying. I mean, it's just ludicrous to sit there and say that you're going to just say there's no rational, or I mean, there's no fairly certain, fairly perfect, fairly finished, fairly completely sufficiently reliable statements of fact. Sufficiently reliable statement of fact. There's sufficiently reliable statements of fact, and those statements don't have any bias tied to them beyond the fact that you're establishing concepts and properties. You're establishing vocabulary. I mean, it's hardly subjective to say, yes, we're going to establish the existence of two-ness and four-ness and five-ness and six-ness. I mean, that is not subjective, that's just rational.
Yes. But it's dependent on an intelligent, rational consciousness. That's all. And so the whole presupposition that we can attain some valuation or evaluation where we can value a negative state to sentient suffering is dependent on that fact of sentient cognition.
Well, it doesn't matter anyway. I mean, it either is or is not a bad thing. We either recognize it and accurately describe it, or we inaccurately describe it. But to say it's nothing is idiotic. It's either is or it is not. But to say it's nothing is retarded.
I agree, but the problem is, you know, when people will suppose that, oh, well, that's all subjective.
Well, I'm just saying it's retarded to say it's nothing. We know it's a something, so it's stupid. It either is significant or it isn't significant. And I'm just saying the evidence for its significance overwhelms the evidence for its insignificance, so this just isn't an argument. I don't know how you can possibly have an argument where you say, well, we're just going to say everything's nothing because we're afraid to label it because our labels are suspect. Well, that doesn't make any sense because whether we label it or not, it is something, and you can choose not to label the something, but the something is something.
Exactly. So that feeds right to my question. And I'm sorry if it's confusing. I mean, I'm just struggling with some of these concepts. So the idea is that we could arrive at such a conclusion logically without needing empathy or compassion or morality.
Yeah, we're just recognizing function. We're recognizing its properties, and we're putting it in a category. It's just not that complicated. Sentience is a property. You go in the category feeling. You go in the category vulnerable. You go in the category capable of expressing unpleasant sensation. You go in the category capable of expressing positive sensation. I mean, you go in all these categories by merely defining you as a sentient.
Right.
So yeah, compassion is quite irrelevant. I mean, it's not a, your personal perception theoretically is irrelevant in all of these descriptions. It should be, you know. I mean, and the silly qualifiers we use are just that, silly qualifiers, right? I mean, I always use the argument, the your child crap, where people think the your word is, or my, is more important than the child part. I mean, the properties of the child are the thing that are important. It's not this possession thing is totally not important. What value the child has is projected out of the child's existence, not out of your existence. So that's evidence of subjectivity.
And that's all empirically measurable. We can conceive of that being measurable.
Well, we can know that somebody can claim their child's better than everybody else's kid, but we know how reliable that statement is, right? Because we know when we measure it realistically, their kid isn't better than anybody else's kid.
Well, I was listening earlier. I'm sorry I missed a lot of the conversation. I know that Piro was on.
Yeah, he wasn't very useful. He just talked about how to monetize shit on the internet and how to make a mechanism for making all this stuff more commercial. And I sort of just brought up the point that no, you really do have to cover it with chocolate syrup. You have to turn this into something that people will gravitate. It has to be a replacement for the things they're already eating. You know what I mean? They're eating American Idol and Survivor and, just pure crap. And so you have to cover this with crap to get them to eat it, So you have to feed them little pieces of something more elegant and more beautiful until you can get them a new addiction. Get them hungry for brain food. You can't just give them brain food. You have to teach them how to be hungry for it. You have to get them a taste for it. And so that the real strategy would be is to create some sort of, some sort of over-the-top, philosophy to the death show or whatever. But you know what I mean? Something that had real prizes and real hard rhetoric and real hard, something quite, I'm not saying we should be hitting each other with chairs, but you know what I mean? You have to go a little bit Jerry Springer. Philosophy plus Jerry Springer or something.
Well, the truth is novel for most people.
Oh, I got a problem warning. Testing, am I still here?
Yeah, I can hear you.
It's funny, they tell me unexpected error has occurred. Oh my, what will I do? Pretend it didn't happen, that's what I'll do. Yes, I'll anticontivate it out of existence. Problem warning? I don't see any problem warning. It's an opportunity warning. But anyway, yeah, it is just so discouraging when you're thinking that, oh wow, you have to start all the way at the beginning, that rocks are hard and water's wet and this is debatable. Oh shit. We got an awful long way to go to get to human ethics then. If I have to start all the way down there.
Well, it just seems that you have encountered this kind of, the is-ought gap problem multiple times.
Yeah, I just never thought of it as a real thing, and I don't know how many people are really. It's it seems to be kind of obscure philosophy to me. So you run into all these philosophy truthers, maybe that's what I should call them. You know, the Nietzscheites and the rest. And I don't know how reflective they are of any real people in the world. You know what I mean? It's like the anarchists. I don't think there's too many of them.
Right.
The internet kind of gives you a false impression of what the world's made out of. But, you know, it also gives you a pretty good impression of, you know, how sappy and yuck the world is too. You know, just because you see the videos that get watched and they're just so, you know, oh, YouTubers, I'm your buddy guy. How you doing today? Well, today we're going to talk about, like, you know, I don't know, snapping my fingers. Yeah, you know, snapping your fingers, it works better if they're a little bit wet. Yeah.
It's all a process. I mean, I had to learn about libertarianism, and I had to learn about anarchism, and you learn from its advocates, essentially, right? About what they're about.
Yeah, I just mean that the average person isn't really playing that game, but they're playing a game that's so stupid that I don't know if I want to talk to them either. It's just so difficult. I mean, you can't just play this thing by the numbers, you know what I mean? You can't do what's logical to your brain, you know, just make an argument. You do have to make an argument.